Good morning. You can see the title of my talk is A Sea of Change. I've had a chance to be in this industry for 31 years. I traveled last year about 220,000 air miles across the country, getting a chance to walk through job sites, work with builders. It's an amazing, amazing opportunity. What a gift to be in one of the greatest industries there is. We build buildings for people that last for generations. That's an amazing thing to have and to do. One of the challenges, though, I want to share with us this morning is to really talk a little bit about how we look at the sea change. And the idea of sea change is really a change that is often for the better. And I believe the progression of things that are happening in our industry are for the better. And it continually improves, and we continually see improvements. I'll share a little bit of that with you. Now, three key challenges that our industry, of course, is facing, and all of us know the challenges are always in play. Trying to decide how we manage and navigate through those. The last downturn, the challenges that we have are there. I'm going to just list three key challenges that I think are critical to the situation that we're in right now. First one, I believe, ends up being, of course, labor. And I think labor is one of the great and most difficult things we're going to face. I think labor is a challenge because the industry is not seeing the influx of people. I said during the downturn, we lost about 600,000 framers. Knowing that the importance of labor in our marketplace is to execute effectively a very challenging thing. Putting together a house is an amazing and complex process. Thousands of building materials, sometimes 20 and 30 trade contractors, all somehow coalescing together to put a product on the street that should last for 100 years or more. And the chance that I get a chance to walk around the country, I ask builders about the length of longevity of buildings, and I often hear 100 years, 150 years, and I think about that. Think about that legacy and the importance of it, and that labor is essential for us to drive that. One of the things I want to encourage you, and I'll end the day and the discussion today about that, about how we increase and improve the ability to bring people into our industry. Many times we don't look at the sharing with people the successes that really result in how it's been wonderful for us. So to bring people there, but it's also about getting a level of commitment by those people to really understand how valuable this is. So we need to share that a little bit better. I'm going to talk a little bit about improved building performance. Some of it I heard in the talks I gave in the last day or so, that people get frustrated sometimes by advancing codes, feeling that sometimes they're a little too onerous, that they push us a little too hard. And I'm going to share with you a little bit today about how critical it is that we do drive building performance. The building improved performance is more than just energy efficiency or meeting some kind of code tolerance. It's really the expectation that our clients have. These houses are, as Peter said, healthy, safe, durable, efficient. We have to make sure that's part of the process that we go through. And finally, I think it's critical that we look at innovation. And I was at the CES show, the Consumer Electronics Show in Vegas about 2 weeks ago. And I watched this show, about 1/3 of the Consumer Electronics Show. There was 140,000 people there. A third of the show was dedicated to advancing technology in homes. So where are we with that? And how are we going to make sure that there's some ownership on our part to make sure we know what's coming in, what the opportunities are, how we communicate that, and possibly how we sell that innovation. So I think it's critical that we're participating in that. I think the next phase is really to look at how, this a little bit slower for me. There we go. I wanted to share this quote with you from Albert Einstein, and I think it's pretty important. It says, we cannot solve a problem by using the same kind of thinking we used when we created them. And we do have problems. We have challenges with durability in buildings. I'm not sure if some of you are aware of that the statistic has shown that last year, 2016, the state of Florida experienced nearly $1 billion in water-related intrusion problems. We've got to make sure that as an industry, we really understand how to make sure we take ownership in the fact that whatever durability and performance problems we have, we've got this. Managing these details is something that there's a product mix, there's an opportunity, there's a skill set, there's people that want to help us, but we as a group have to completely engage in changing that challenge. If 80% of the litigation in our industry is caused by the mismanagement of that one thing, water, we can take care of this. We've got this. We need a process, but we need to dedicate our efforts and our time to that. We have to strive also when I look at what buildings require. If you look at buildings are systems, and they are striving for healthy and safe. I believe buildings need to be healthy and safe, and defining that is difficult. We're seeing in markets where they're changing furnaces and water heaters to make sure there's no combustion spillage, that the air quality is being improved. We're looking at this issue I talked about as durability, about comfort and comfort expectations. Today's buyers have a different expectation of comfort. In the old days, when I grew up in Minnesota, if I was cold in the winter, we would sit by the heat register or put on a jacket. In the summertime, we didn't have air conditioning in Minnesota, which is a hot, humid place. If I was hot, I would sit in front of a fan and wait until September, right? But today, I have an expectation. I need to be somewhere between 71 and 72. And part of that expectation is driven by my car. I'm on this side, dialing it to 71, and the person right over here has decided that 68 would be just right for them. Imagine the message that that sends to clients that the upstairs bedroom, the one on the west side, the living room should all be identically and close to comfort. We look at energy efficiency, and I believe that energy efficiency is paramount. If you look at, in this country in terms of energy consumption, about 75% roughly of the energy consumed in this country is consumed in buildings. So we have a tremendous opportunity to help reduce the overall consumption of energy in buildings. And what a legacy we leave. Remember when I talked about the longevity of buildings? When was my first chance to improve the overall performance of a building? But the day I built it. Making sure I had insulation in the right place, put it in the right area, and make sure that the insulation, the caulking, the details that make a difference really are added. I don't really care about what the code says. I care about what my clients expect and the legacy that we leave moving forward. Finally, a couple things that cost effectiveness does matter. One of the most important innovations that we have is the realization that every time we improve energy efficiency, it has a return on investment that far exceeds the initial investment on the front side. Today's buyers are asking us for that. What's the smartest thing I could do in my house? You can say, adding energy efficiency to your building lowers the overall net cost per month. Finally, aesthetics is critical. We also realize that people want a beautiful house. They want the interior finishes that we expect, and we got to blend those. And the final point, of course, is sustainability. The idea of making buildings that are resilient and that are also responsible for the resources that they use. If we look at change, change will affect performance, and there is a lot of change. Buildings are going to be more complex. I would say complexity is part of it. Does that roof line look a little challenging? And we have architects that provide us with a drawing, and we all look at it and go, wow, that's going to be amazing. And thank goodness we can call BMC and say, could you guys make this truss? And they're like, absolutely. Should we? Of course, right? So in this terms of complexity, we have to decide, is that going to be part of the challenge? If we also look at things like, it's all right, it's a little slow. There we go. I'm going to go back one. If we looked at windows, we have more windows. What an amazing opportunity. Windows are so important to part of the building. Jeff Wedge and I had the pleasure of doing a lecture earlier in the week here. We talked about windows and the critical nature that windows provide. They're this visual bridge to the outdoors. They enhance the beauty of a home, and they're so critical. And window performance today and the technology has improved enough that we can really look at doing a better job and improving the performance of windows. The technology in glass is amazing. The addition of thermal insulation, more insulation. People often ask me all the time, they say, hey Mark, what's your favorite insulation? And I say, more. And I think the idea, if you look at the display, BMC did a phenomenal job out in the entryway or in the air registration area, putting together a product in a house that had variations in how we can insulate buildings. And more insulation does also create the opportunity for change. We have more cladding options today. Sometimes we have 2 and 3 cladding options on one house. You always have to remember they all vary in their performance, and it's critical that we're making sure they all perform with the building. It is true that some of our materials, thanks to things like insulation and tighter structures, are a little more water sensitive. So we have to make sure we appreciate the resource, the product, the application, to make sure it doesn't come back to haunt us later, should it be challenged in terms of its overall performance. We look at more airtight buildings, and I hear this many times. I ask people, do you think buildings are getting too tight? And people say, I think they're getting too tight. And oftentimes what we'll tell them is that houses aren't too tight. They just lack the fundamental thing called ventilation, and we can do that and improve performance. Mechanical systems have gotten more complex as well. People expect this comfort range to be critical. They want filtration on their houses. They want indoor environmental air control. And we have to make sure that as long as we appreciate that that will provide some change, we can make a better product. There's more exhaust appliances that are creating greater draft. We watch people watching the cooking channel. My sister and her husband are a victim of this. They watch the cooking show and have realized that because I can have 6 burners and a great big fan in the house, of course that might affect the house that becomes tighter. So I would agree, and I'm sure you would agree, that this is a lot of change. And we are all trying to adapt to that change, making sure that this isn't about code issues, it's about consumer expectations, and realizing with that amount of change and adding to that the chance that there is more to come. And what kind of change is going to come even beyond what we just saw. And this expectation thing by buyers, and how many of you have experienced higher expectations? Our buyers do drive us to improve performance. They have expectations that are greater than they've ever been. How do we deliver on that expectation challenge? If you look at some surveys that were done, this is done by the Shelton Group, and it basically says that 81% of people who expect to buy a new home in the next 2 years say energy efficiency will cause them to choose one new home over another. That should tell us something about the fact that if we're not having the dialogue with our clients, we might be missing an opportunity. We also realize that people are probably willing to pay for that. The idea is that making sure that we represent how that's going to make an impact. It says 40% of people who will expect to buy a new home in the next 2 years say they're very likely to pay more for a higher performance house. So maybe that's a dialogue we want to make sure that we have with them to encourage them to make those decisions. Finally, we have things about innovation, and what kind of innovation do we have? If you look in the exhibitors that have been so generous to come here and show us what we've got, what they've got, the kind of things and choices we can make, how innovation really does create a way for us to differentiate an existing house from a new house. How do we create that innovation? How do we talk about innovation? How many of you are familiar with the Tesla house? Have you ever seen any of this, where that house right there, of course, produces the same amount of energy as it consumes? What an interesting exercise in seeing that people are saying, you know, if I had a choice, I might choose that. And we're realizing that across the country and in California, we're watching this progression move, that maybe there is a place in the future. 5 years? Is it 10 years? I'd heard a good friend of mine, Gordon Cook, shared with me, he said the future is already here. It's just dispersed a little bit. So I'm seeing how this might be a challenge and an opportunity. This is the new Apple store in Union Square, New York City, and showing that the roof is helping to power nearly the entire building. Is it possible for us to do those kind of things to really change the world and change the behavior and really look at this country being centric on the opportunities here? I looked at this idea when I was at the show at CES, and it talked about all this automation and how you could walk in the house and say, please put Dana Carvey on the TV. And all of a sudden he pops up on the television. And things are really about that. Can I make sure that you lock the front door? It's time to turn on the dishwasher. How are we engaging in the fact that that might get people out of their homes and bring them into the new homes we're creating? How do we communicate that opportunity and make sure that that's happened? We look at the idea about innovation in buildings and how maybe those things are going to be about the enclosure too. How do we talk about how we improve things, how we make a difference in how buildings are put together, the way that they're assembled, and making sure that our trades and details are done correctly. We saw in the showroom, as I mentioned, back by where the house is constructed, that there's details about how these buildings get put together. How are they created? How are they assembled? Where are the pieces and the components? How about our labor force that maybe aren't speaking English but want to provide a great source of an opportunity to build a better building? How are animations and details and communications clearly explained to the people that execute them? Our great challenge isn't whether the materials or the science is there. The challenge is getting the execution proper and making sure that we understand that when we add thermal insulation to a building, we know where to put it, how to put it on, and how it represents the rest of the structure. This is buildings that we're seeing being built across the country. You'll see it out in the showroom at the big display where they've got an R value on the outside that represents climate levels 5 to 7 and the basic code for 2015 expecting this type of performance. That's an animation from an app called Construction Instruction. There we go. And lastly, I just wanted to share the idea that there's one here on ventilation. Sorry, clicker's having a hard time. I'd like to say it's operator error, but I am clicking right. We're dedicated to fresh air. You know, the technology, I worked in 1979, 1980, seeing some of the first ventilation systems brought into the US from Canada, and they're using air exchangers and things to improve indoor environmental air quality. I think these are critical to making sure we have dedicated fresh air. In some of the talks I'll give, and I'm going to ask this of this group, how many of you are continuous breathers? Most of. So if you look at the art of continuous breathing, how much should fresh air come into a house and how often? Should it be something that, man, I hope today is just windy enough? Have any of you ever opened the door of a teenager's bedroom after they've been sleeping for 12 hours and the door closed? That's really a horrible place to go into, isn't it? So the strategy really is about how do I make sure that fresh air is delivered for occupants and fresh air is driven to the right place. So the next step that we need to take happens to be a choice, not being driven by anything other than expectation. C.S. Lewis said integrity is doing the right thing even when no one is watching. Part of the idea is I've heard people say, you know, the code official didn't pick that up, or the opportunity really is no one saw it. But I think in terms of this industry, this company, and always the people that come to events like this are the highest quality of people I get a chance to meet. I'll tell you that I'm so fortunate to be in an industry with some of the finest people I've ever met in this business. That's incredible. Because what a sense of commitment we have. How many of you have been in this business for so long you can't get out? Have you ever done that? You get in the industry and you try to leave and you're like, no, I'm going to stay here. Because it really provides much more than just pure economics. It's about something that really feels incredible when you are part of something as amazing as being in the building industry. If we look at last couple things about consumer expectations on that side is that people have an expectation. And if you look at those expectations, they really do represent the importance of making sure that we do that. It says 66% of Americans are somewhat concerned about air quality. That tells us a little bit about the fact that, as I mentioned earlier about the ventilation systems, we have to make sure that we're providing that because guess what? They expect it. If I bought a brand new house in 2016, 2017 and beyond, what is their expectation? It says 84% think that an energy efficient home already comes with an improved, healthy environment. So making sure that we're being responsive to that is critical. Lastly, if we really think about a few key details, remember that once you truly understand your client's needs, and that means that we're listening. You know, I had someone explain to me, they said, you know, none of us have ever taken a course in college or in school about listening. And the art of listening is to really make sure that we engage in a discussion about expectations. What is it that you like in your house? What do you expect from your home? What have you experienced in your previous house that will really change things? And making sure that we truly listen, because once we understand their needs, we can easily match the benefits that we provide back to that customer. We want to satisfy those expectations. Sometimes we have 15 or 20 opportunities to talk to them about, and really we got to pick 2 or 3, making sure we really do believe in that. And does craftsmanship still matter in our business? And I think at any given time, you look at things like ReadyFrame. It's one of the things I've been honestly extremely excited about and incredibly impressed. I looked at the idea about finally we have a system and where we can really look at the assembly of a building, the accuracy and the importance. As we all know that the squareness of the foundation, the accuracy, as well as the framing, lends itself to a level of quality we've never had access to before. And so I think craftsmanship is all of that. Finished carpenters, trim pieces, the things that matter is when we finish and walk away and say, that I'm proud of. I was in Massachusetts recently and I had a story. I was talking to a building group in Massachusetts. And one of the fellows came up and I talked about the importance of how we kind of sign our names to things when it's our houses. I'm sure some of you have your name actually associated with your business. And he came up to me afterwards. He said, I just want to tell you something. He said, it was amazing that you had said that because he said, I build high-end custom homes. But he said, I have all my trade contractors sign my houses. When the electrician finishes, he signs the wall. He goes, it may never be seen again. It may be on a piece of drywall or on a stud. But I tell before you walk away, put your signature on the wall that you have left this product with your level of commitment to craftsmanship and integrity. When I asked you to bid the project and said it's a go, I did that based on your commitment to me, that you'll deliver on your promise to craftsmanship at the level that you believe it's at, and actually matches mine. And I think that that's critical that we remember to do that craftsmanship does make a difference. We can see and sense craftsmanship. This is really that culmination piece that I told you about earlier on about labor. And I want all of us to remember this. True leaders do not create more followers, they create more leaders, and that's something I want us to always remember. How many of us maybe learned our craft from an old guy? Anybody remember that? I remember being taught framing from an old guy. The idea of somebody taking the time to show me, to say, come here, I want to show you something. Here's why we do this. Here's why this is important. Jim Moore with Beazer yesterday at the session on risk said, I was going through a detail and through a house, and he said, I wanted them to install a caulk bead on the inside of the window. And I wanted to make sure they did a good job, and I walked in, it wasn't well done. He said, I walked up to him, and he said, why is this not complete? He says, well, he just told me to get caulk in the back dam of the window. He says, well, let me explain something to you. Here's the chief operating officer, the CFO, the CEO of, the operations director of Beazer Homes. Jim will clear that up for me later on. He's just a big deal. And Jim walks in the house and he's always engaged in his product. And he walked up to the guy and he said, listen, here's why this matters. If you don't do a complete job and the sill isn't done, this is what's going to happen. And this is really important that you do this. Can you make sure that happens from now on? Jim said he was out and did something for an hour. He said, I came back, every single window was perfect. And what Jim did is he stopped long enough to say, it's up to me to share what integrity means, what quality means, what craftsmanship means. We have to continue to do that. We can't just expect that people assimilate that they're just going to get it because they're out there. Take the time to show somebody why it matters, why it's important, why your commitment to your buyers is to say, when I take your money, your investment in me to build you a product, I'm going to make absolutely sure my teams are in place. Many of you do this, having meetings on weekdays at the end of the month, talking about quality, building mock-ups. Make sure that we're always committing to the importance of that. My final comment is going to be something I share fairly often, and I really like what it says. I have a series of 4 books. They're leather bound, and they're from our Odell's Carpenter Guides, first published in 1914. My version I got at Powell's Bookstore in Portland, Oregon, and my version was published in 1945. And my version of that book, and opening up book number 1 of Odell's Carpenter Guides, it's a book about details about how to sharpen a saw, picking a bit, really looking at span tables. Imagine the time frame. So my 1945 book is incredible. But I opened up the first version inside the book, and I want to share with you a quote that's inside the front cover of a 1945 Carpenter's Guide. It says that when we build, let us think that we build forever. Let it not be for present delight or present use alone, but let it be such work our descendants will thank us for. That's taking the knowledge of the day and imparting upon the fact that we know what we need to do and we know how to do it, and making sure that we execute at that level because we leave a legacy. How many of you have ever built a house and shown people what you've done? I did those. I built those over there. Who else gets to do that? Nobody else gets to do that. A computer programmer says, today I wrote some amazing code. Today I was moving ones and zeros all day long. We get to point to something that we've created, something that we've done. I did that, I completed that, and it'll be here long after I'm gone. I think that's an amazing statement to make, an amazing thing to be a part of. So I'd sure encourage all of us to make sure that we appreciate the fact that when sometimes we see change coming our way, driving us to make changes that we might not feel comfortable about, let's make sure we analyze what they are. Do they add to customer satisfaction? Do they add to customer improvement? Do they make a better choice for our business? Do they lower our risk? How can we better understand the importance of those features? And making sure that we understand that our teams are essential to making sure that we train them, communicate to them, show them what we want, demonstrate them through mock-ups and other choices, but realize that we have such an opportunity. The home building industry represents better than 3.5% of this country's gross domestic product. That's an amazing thing. Did you know that we are in the same plane of the auto industry in terms of our contribution to this country's economy? When the housing industry is doing okay, the rest of the country is doing okay. So we depend on that. Think of an industry that every dollar that comes in to build a house is shared by local community. People within that marketplace get a chance to see that, get a chance to share that. We're in a coffee shop in a house that we built, and there's my plumber, my drywall contractor, and the electrician. His family and their families live within that community based on the fact that we create and drive economy at the local level as well as the national level. It's an amazing, amazing opportunity to have and a remarkable responsibility. I want to thank all of you guys for making this commitment and admitting that this is a great thing and this is really a great company. I've had the great pleasure the last year to work with BMC in 12 different markets around the country. We got a chance to go out and teach building science for a day. And it was incredible, the type of people that came, the level of engagement, coming up on the stage, and we talked about details, walking them through the things that mattered most. It was amazing to watch that level of interest and to see that their commitment was, let's go out and try it. Let's go out and see what happens. Let's go out and see the level of interest. And I think it demonstrated to them and to me that BMC is a different kind of company. They're the kind of company that wants to make sure that all of us are successful at every level. And I think that that's rare. And I just want to thank all of you guys for showing up today and coming. Thank you.